I believe that every person in this room should be an educator. I believe that through teaching others, each and every person in this room is capable of creating a community of learners. By a show of hands, how many of you have been inspired by an educator at some point in your life? Someone who made you feel like you were empowered, made you feel like you belong, made you feel welcome and inspired. Let's see those hands again. Awesome. Almost everyone in the room. Conversely, how many of you have ever had a negative experience with an educator? Someone who made you feel like you didn't belong, like you were discouraged, that you weren't good enough, by a show of hands. All the more reason for you to become an educator. Now, when I say that everyone in this room should become an educator, what I mean is that everyone in this room should do what great educators strive to do, and that is to create a community of learners. I was very fortunate when I was in elementary school and high school to have amazing educators, individuals who embodied compassion, caring, confidence, and a willingness to give to their community. I envisioned my teachers as role models, so much so that I went on to spend 25.25 years of my life in the formal education system, with 7.25 of those years as a high school business education teacher. Teaching was far more rewarding than I ever could have imagined. But when I first started out, I was absolutely terrified. I felt so alone, standing at the front of the classroom in front of 32 15-year-olds staring at me, and I started to wonder, did I belong? Was I prepared for this? Would they eat me alive? And most importantly, did they know I still lived in my parents' basement? I'll never forget my very first Meet the Teacher night. I walked into a classroom bustling with energy from the students and the parents. And as I approached the front of the classroom, I said something along the lines of, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mr. McFarlen, and I am your son or daughter's grade 9 teacher." And that was when it happened. The father in the front row on the left-hand side had a reaction he just couldn't control. His jaw dropped, and he had this look of disgust and disappointment. He was in awe that me, this young whippersnapper, fresh out of university, was tasked with teaching his daughter. It made me feel like I didn't belong. But after that, I felt like I would never allow myself to not belong again. Over the next 7.25 years, I worked tirelessly with my team to build a business education program. This was a program built on courses that were electives, things like entrepreneurship, personal finance, business, and social technology, all classes that students are not required to take to graduate. So I knew that we would need to be innovative and do things differently if we were going to be successful and if we were going to survive. Over time, our students went on to accomplish things I could have never imagined. They got accepted into prestigious programs like the Wharton School of Business, universities from Toronto to Vancouver. They started companies, but most importantly, they gave back to their community, and all the time, they gave back to the program. Our current learners always benefited from our former learners, whether that was through emails, through Skype, through in-person visits. We had truly created a community of learners. Now, when I say community of learners, what I really mean is a group of individuals who get together around a shared topic or shared interest. These are things that don't always have to happen at school, like we did, focusing on youth entrepreneurship and financial literacy in a school setting, but they can happen at work, in your personal life, online, all sorts of places. The real idea is that the collective group achieves far more than any one individual could on their own. That's the concept behind the community of learners. Individuals feel engaged, and they're not restricted to a classroom. Our society needs communities of learners, and that's why I think that every person in this room should work to create a community of learners. Now that we know what a community of learners is, we have to ask ourselves, how do we create that? From my experience, I believe there are 4 key ingredients to creating a community of learners. The first thing is you need to create culture. All of us want to belong. We want to be a part of something. We want to be included. Creating an inclusive environment and really nurturing that first follower that we learned about earlier is integral. Sometimes we can do that in a somewhat shocking or different way. If we think about professional baseball, we see how they show their sense of belonging. It's through those wild handshakes after home runs. One thing that we did, which was small and I didn't think would stick, eventually became one of the key identifiers for our program. Something people wanted to do, expected to do, and identified us by. We abolished clapping. Now, this wasn't something I invented. I actually borrowed it from a basketball camp I went to as a youth. But as opposed to clapping, we would give 2 power claps. 1, 2. And as little as it is, it had a huge impact on our culture. But as opposed to me talking about it, I want everybody to try this with me. So please get your hands ready. And when I say give me 2, we got to have 2 claps on the beat. So let's try this. Everybody give me 2. That feels really good. Now, if we get fired up, we would actually give 2 more. And later on, it just always became 2 more. But let's try that again. Let's give TEDxRPLCentralLibrary 2. 2 more. That feels good. Feels really good. So give your community something to belong to, but also something to remember. Ingredient number 2 is get out of the way. Oftentimes, leaders and teachers feel like they need to be at the front of the classroom. They need to pave the way. It needs to come from them. They feel like it needs to be a bit of a one-way street. But I feel like the best-kept secret in education is that learning is actually a 2-way street. I learned far more than I could have ever imagined from my students, just as they were learning from me. I feel there are many ways we can do this in our lives, both in work and personal. One of these examples is that we used to go to networking events all the time. And typically, as the teacher, I would go up and I would demonstrate a good handshake to make sure our students didn't do the floppy fish. We would engage in small chat, and then I would segue the student into the conversation. But in my second year of teaching, I attended an event with one of our students, Arjun. Arjun and I met at the event. We met in the foyer of the venue, and I told Arjun I needed to quickly run to the bathroom and I'd be right back. When I returned, Arjun was gone, and I thought that was a bit weird. As we walked into the venue, I could see Arjun work in the room, talking to a variety of different individuals, and as I approached, he was talking to a group of local politicians and a CEO, and he introduced me. He said, "Excuse me, so-and-so, have you met my teacher, Mr. McFarlen?" And I, almost like that shy young student, came up and said, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you." And that's when I had my aha moment. We had done it. We had created these networking monsters who no longer needed us. And it was amazing what happens when you get out of the way. Think about ways in which you can get out of the way. Ingredient number 3 is bend the rules. When I first started teaching, Miss Debbie Ladresse told me, it is easier to beg for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. Now, that can be a slippery slope, but I think it's an integral thing. We often have views around policies or procedures that have been in place for a long time, but we have to wonder, are they the best practice, or are they just the way everything has been done in the past? When we think of education, we often view it as a specific time, a specific location, and a specific subject. And that's where learning has to happen. But I disagree. I think that the magic happens over the lunch hour, during the evenings, on the weekends, on road trips, at events, all other times. We did our best to get out of the classroom and to learn by doing. So I would challenge you to bend the rules, break out of your normal environment, and try to do things a little bit differently by actually being out and being in the community. Ingredient number 4 is to be a cheerleader. Believe in somebody more than they believe in themselves. Learning can be scary. Growth can be scary. Sometimes self-confidence and self-esteem can dip. But if you have someone who constantly believes in you, that can be an extremely powerful thing. I think back to an experience when I was in grade 11 playing in the high school volleyball city final against Campbell Collegiate, which is later where I went on to teach. We were down 2-0 in a best-of-5 match, and we were kind of getting kicked. As we jogged back to our bench to start the third set, feeling like we were likely going to lose the next set and eventually lose the game, one of our teachers, Mr. Shed, was in the packed crowd, but I'll never forget him standing out in the back row. And he was screaming at the top of his lungs, "You gotta believe! You gotta believe!" And initially, we just thought Mr. Shed was crazy. But we started to believe. Why not us? Why couldn't we do this? And as we started to believe, it started to work. We went on to win the game, a game that we probably didn't have any right winning at the start, and I largely think that was due to the crazy fan, Mr. Shed, who believed in us more than we believed in ourselves. Now, you might not be a screamer, and you might not like sports, so think about ways in which you can be a cheerleader for other people. One of the things I like to do is when I go grocery shopping and I see former students, I'll often go to their till and wait in line. Sometimes that means I add 10 to 15 minutes to my grocery experience, which my girlfriend doesn't appreciate, but I think it's important to show that support, to cheer on those students, provide that feedback, and to continue to nurture those relationships. So don't be afraid to be a cheerleader. Those are the 4 key ingredients. Create culture, bend the rules, get out of the way, and be a cheerleader. That's all great, but the true test of any community of learners is really whether or not it can live on beyond its leader and beyond its creator. Oftentimes, we associate a specific individual to a community and feel that it lives and dies with that individual. I'm proud to say that the community we worked hard to build has been able to live on after I recently left it due to a new exciting opportunity. Some people were very excited for me. They were very proud of this new challenge I was embarking on, but others were very upset. Individuals from the business community, the school, students, who felt as though I was abandoning the community we had worked so hard to build. They thought it would die. They thought it wouldn't live on. They felt like it was the end. But I knew deep down, if we had truly created a community of learners, it would live on because of that shared ownership by the group, the students, the alumni, the teachers, the community. I'm proud to say that to this day, the program is still thriving and will continue to do so for many more years. Now, you're probably thinking, great, Jordan, that sounds awesome, but not all of us should be high school teachers. And I agree. Not everyone should be a high school teacher. Not everyone should be an elementary school teacher. Communities of learners are not restricted to educational settings. I think that every person in this room is capable of creating a community of learners. What I would challenge you is to think about areas in your life in which you can get together, a group of individuals who have a shared interest that you can nurture and help inspire so that we have more communities of learners. Imagine a world filled with communities of lifelong learners. Thank you.